best thing that I've found, Keith, is kids learn off of clips. And that's not something that I figured out. It's something that Coach Gundy banged into me ninth. He's like, Hauser, all these slides are cool, and I know you spent a lot of time on it, but the kids learn by seeing themselves. They learn by seeing the professional clips.
I'm excited about today's episode with a coach who's had a winding path through the NFL, Division III, and the FBS. Spent some time with Oklahoma State and Iowa State with their special teams, and now is taking his view of the game and bringing that to coaches through his social media account, Teach Tapes, which I started to follow and tracked down Coach Steve Hauser from there. So, Coach, it's great to have you here on the podcast, and I'm excited to talk ball with you here today.
Appreciate you having me, Keith. It's been fun kind of figuring this out as we go of, what football has become for me and, hopefully how I can push that back out and maybe put a little different spin on it.
So your start in coaching really comes from the background of being from a coaching family. Talk to us about just that influence and growing up around the game and really how that led you into coaching.
It's just like a lot of coaches, if my dad was a doctor, I probably would have done that. If he was in the military, I might have done that. It's just, you grow up. My dad was a high school football coach. My uncles were Division II and Division III coaches in New England. And, you sneak down the stairs when you should be in bed and you watch these guys in the living room, and it's, Sunday night or Monday night, and they're watching the opponents, and, you can watch that tape as long as you can until you speak up and you get sent back to bed. So it's probably those memories that you hold on to and for some reason push you down this path. But, it's been more than a great decision to get involved in this game.
And your path into the game has taken you into the upper levels of the game. I know you spent some time in Cleveland, and as I mentioned before, you spent some time with Matt Campbell and Coach Gundy, and just some incredible influences there. So as you look at that aspect of growing up as a coach, what were some key things that helped you develop along the way?
Keith, I think it starts way before even that. I mean, I got a really rare chance when I was still in college to do a training camp internship with the Browns. That was going into the seasons of 2009 and 2010, I believe. That was when Coach Mangini was still in Cleveland. He played for my college coach, and there was a favor pulled out that I got to go work in the equipment room and do the laundry, set up the cones, pull the chains, catch the balls for the quarterbacks. I mean, it was a rare insight into that world. And the interns and coaching assistants who were in those years, I mean, they really were incredible sources of feedback and connections of what the game is, and just following their careers. They're still great people for me to touch base with, and they've provided me a lot of these great opportunities that I could kind of put in to the coaching or scouting world wherever I was. But it all started back then with just watching these guys and trying to figure out how I could fit in.
I know we talked a little bit about this a few weeks ago when we first connected, and just the way that you saw special teams coached and the emphasis and what Coach Gundy and Coach Campbell really brought to your view of coaching up those sides of the balls, and distinctly different ways of doing it. But if you'd share that with our listeners and how that was influential in being able to work with those different guys.
100%. And just like any of us, you learn from the people around you. And Coach Gundy was incredible for me. I mean, I started there at 22 years old as an office assistant, like literally the offensive secretary. I was the first male in that role, and, sat in the quarterback meetings with Coach Munkin back in the day, left for Cleveland for the front office piece, and, knew that I wanted to get back into coaching after a couple of years. And, he took me back as the special teams coordinator. They've run it out of that GA role for a long time. I was kind of the third evolution of that. Robbie Disher, Ty Linder had done it before me. And, Coach really put a lot for me to be able to run the meetings and set up the drills and, work with our coaches, the position guys. So Coach Gundy's big thing was just make sure the kids know the why. Like when you're going through the drills, he'd stop a drill and be like, hey, why are we doing this punt return drill? Well, hey, on the backside edge, I got to check for fake, and then I can work the wall and make sure I keep that guy high and inside of me, right? Play legal. Cool. We can keep doing the drill. Whereas Coach Campbell, I was in the QC analyst role, was not in the front of the room in those settings. And, it was making sure the organization was spot on, setting up our position coaches and making sure the kids knew where to be, right? That the equipment guys, the video guys, everything was aligned so that when we have our 7 minutes, we're getting the most out of it, and then we can coach it off the tape.
In talking to special teams coaches, that's really a huge factor in this, is that your time is limited. So there's a lot that goes into planning that 7 minutes, much, much more time than the actual 7 minutes. So talk to us about the detail and how you break that up in order to prepare for that and make sure then that it's captured. And then afterwards, you got to teach off of it as well. But talk to us about the organization of that period so that it is effective use of your time.
And Keith, maybe I didn't even appreciate that as much until, my last spring ball at Arkansas State, when we were a totally new staff. You're getting to know the equipment guys, the video guys, even the equipment managers, right? How do we want to set this up? You're meeting with them beforehand. You got your Visio drawings, you got your screenshots. Eventually, it was awesome to just start using Teamworks and texting the players those pictures, because, you have the old school, put it on the tack board in the locker room, but everyone's got their phone. Make sure that guys are knowing where they need to be, because it is going to be different. Like, I was fortunate at Oklahoma State to already know that building from my previous time there. I worked with Joe Houston as the special teams coordinator my first year there, so got to be with him, who's one of my best friends in coaching, and see how the building worked before I was kind of managing it behind the scenes through our position coaches year 2 and 3 at Iowa State. So I had a little bit of a runway to get to know the building. But, man, when you go to a new program and you're all new, it takes relationships, just like anything. And I probably should have started, Keith, like, you got to be a resource and an asset and a human with the other position coaches, right? Because their time is so valuable, offense, defense, recruiting. If I can steal a guy in my office or at my desk for 3 to 5 minutes max and tell them, hey, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, ask me a real question to make sure we get what we need, and we'll figure it out.
I think that is another challenging aspect of doing that job. And as you mentioned, you've kind of been in all the roles in special teams, from leading the room to being the analyst or QC guy, supporting those coaches, because their primary job is something else, but they're going to coach part of that unit, or a unit, a position, whatever it might be. I've seen it done a number of different ways. How do you help set them up for success so that they're supported well, they can do their other job, but this gets the attention that it needs?
And I think the best way to do that, Keith, is by setting the table the best way, making sure that I'm organized, that I'm valuing their time, and that I have a way to actually be a human and talk with them, and they know where I'm coming from. It's not something to try to justify my job description. It's, hey, just like you're doing this at linebacker, hey, we're hat and hands in this kickoff drill. That's why I got you running it. Make sure you can lean on those coaching points and know that we're all speaking the same language. That is something that's huge. We all aspire to have that carryover language. But again, when you have a short amount of time to communicate, it adds even more value for both the kids and the coaches.
I think that's a good point that you bring up there, and finding and fitting those guys. Just like we talk about player skill sets, well, there's things that our coaches on our staff do well. How do you go about organizing that and saying, what, this guy, I see him doing this in this area here, or this is part of their scheme, their technique. How do you start fitting those guys into your different units and positions?
One good example of that, Keith, would just be always having one person with your punt returners or kick returners. And that's their only job with special teams. And usually you try to match it up. If it's a running back as your returner, that's who you want coaching the returners, right? If it's your receivers coach, that way, we're doing Friday walkthroughs, and, guys like Nate Shielhouse and Marcus Arroyo, they're taking those guys at Oklahoma State or Iowa State, and those are their position players, right? It's their guys that aren't involved in any other special teams. They're able to do some extra drills or some awareness stuff, and they're committed because it's their guy. They're the ones that are 40 yards down the field, make sure he's aligned on the right width and the right depth, because you're watching the other 10 guys or 8 guys in the box, and, your corners coach is coaching the jammers on punt return. But when you're able to really give ownership to that guy, and he knows that's the guy with the ball in his hand and he's in my position room anyways, I feel like you get a lot more buy-in.
Going back to Coach Gundy and the emphasis on understanding the why, again, even though you get meeting time, it seems like those meeting times are, they're stealing time as well. So it's not necessarily always the same amount maybe as some of the other units get, or positions get. So you have to be efficient in your time. It's easy to get lost in, here's our scheme, go do this, this, and this. So how do you coach up the why and make sure really that comes to the forefront? The how certainly is important. The where they're supposed to go is important. But that why probably is what's going to give you the success over the long run. So how do you do that?
The best thing that I've found, Keith, is kids learn off of clips. And that's not something that I figured out. It's something that Coach Gundy banged into me ninth. He's like, Hauser, all these slides are cool, and I know you spent a lot of time on it, but the kids learn by seeing themselves. They learn by seeing the professional clips, and not to jump into the teach tape stuff, but it's probably why I was searching for other examples, Keith, whether it's situations or, punt returners doing things the right way and then having success. Like, you can't always coach those guys when you're coaching the core group as much. So when you, again, empower those other coaches, they can bring, hey, if the returners coach is only coaching the returners, he can take those guys in his running back or receiver room, and you've got another cut up of a meeting for them. And they see, a guy having a great example at a high level, or, hey, a situational awareness that, man, we talked about this in fall camp, but it's real. Like, this can happen in real time, and let's learn from it now while we're sitting here in a room and it's calm on a Tuesday versus when everything's, high wire on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, well, I think that is a good segue into what you're doing now. There has been a transition made, but you continue with the passion of a coach to help coaches and to help make this game better. And so that really has become embodied in your account on Twitter at Teach Tapes, which, again, amazing content that you put together there, whether that's a coach talking about something or a clip that just shows a certain technique done the right way. I enjoy that so much and get lost in there, and I got to say, you do steal some of my time because it's so engaging. But how did you make this transition to it? What was the thought in moving in this direction?
In the career change, that's obviously a deep family thing of making sure we're getting things in line for our people the right way. But the passion for the clips and finding those examples, it definitely started during COVID, during quarantine. Selfishly, Keith, I mean, the special teams full-time jobs, they're few and far between. So a lot of guys are being the running backs coach or the tight ends guy. And, my background was receivers. So, man, how do I find some other clips if, in an interview session afterwards, I know what I want to be about and what are the best doing. So I was finding that and screen recording it on my phone. And then, you keep searching and you find some great linebacker or DB stuff. And, I'm an offensive guy by nature. So I'm like, man, that'd be good to have. And before you know it, you got all these different little clips and you're segmenting it out into folders. And it's like, now that I'm out, and I was like, man, that was my hobby of pushing that out into the world. And, I've joked with coaches behind the scenes. We all fill our my folders with these examples and these quote teach tapes. And how much shine do they actually get? You show them in, fall camp, or you have them in your clinics later in the year to show the coaches. But, man, just put it out into the universe. And it's amazing when you hear it from the best. It's not my voice. Like, there's never one time where it's me over recording it. This is what the people are saying in the moment. And hopefully we can all find a way to fit that into our scheme in your organization, because at the end of the day, technique's technique, and hopefully that's as base as we can make it.
Yeah, it's funny too, the power of a different voice saying it. I relate that to coaching your own kid. At some point, usually around the time they turn into a teenager, the voice you have might be saying the same thing as somebody else, but all of a sudden now that one gets more attention. And I think our guys who are in our room and hear us again and again and again, now all of a sudden somebody else is saying it. I do think it's a powerful reinforcement of what we're doing. So in looking at what is the most effective way to put together a teach tape that is going to solidify everything and bring it home. And they do like watching themselves, but they also like that aspirational stuff and watching other guys. What's been your mix or your formula in putting something together that's going to be effective when you have the opportunity to sit down in your room and share those things with your players?
To me, Keith, it's about keeping it as short and sweet as I can. I mean, all of these clips that I'm putting out, I'm trying to keep it under 45 seconds and really keep it one tight message and one little mic drop, and we're on to the next. Because if it's this big winding road, I mean, I can't, do TikTok. My technology kind of ended with Instagram stories, but, it is definitely more consumable than like you see these big, long ESPN stories, and they even have the little audio player next to it that you can just push play. So trying to make sure we've all got a couple moments. Everyone's always super busy. It's just the way the world is. So if we can have one take-home point and move on, hopefully we catalog it so we can index it later on. But let's just take it while we can and learn from it and keep going.
Do you have a recommendation? Our coach is heading into camp right now. I'm sure they're putting together teach tapes for their own units. And as you mentioned, there's so much stuff out there, right? Some of us have it cataloged ourselves. There's stuff that we see, we make a note of, it's over here. What's your recommendation to be most efficient in putting together your teach tapes and really honing in on the things that are going to be most impactful?
I wish I could ask somebody else, Keith, and take notes from what they say, because that's always what I'm trying to figure out. The thing that always helped me was, we were Exos, and whatever your system is of, headings group and organization and tagging your clips and, color coding that stuff. So in the blink, when you're building your meetings out, man, I can go to, comment box 3, and that's where I always have this stuff and term search it. Like, cause you can't make it perfectly manicured. You can't have every playlist dialed in, but if if I go in and click all these 7-on-7 reps and put them in an edit and I search one column, then I term search it or I sort it and I'm getting a chance, man, you can find it on the fly a lot quicker than if you got it all blank. So all that paper, I tried to get rid of it, and have it tagged within the video. Cause, going back to what we said earlier from Coach Gundy, like the clips are what matter.
Definitely. I think too, as the technology becomes more and more accessible for us and better in just how we can use the technology to teach. And I'll point to an example of a clinic we did with Tyler Roll, and it was probably 3 hours worth of clinic, but then we worked with Coach and we cut that down and found the most impactful things, and then with some telestration tools. Now, these were the more high-end expensive ones, but Coach Paint, to paint up the things that were most important and pointing that out, that found what might have been a list of 5 or 6 plays explaining the same point really could be boiled down to one clip that captures it and provides that visual for the players. And I think, it was 2009 that Huddle, for the majority of the levels of football, broke the film room out of the film room, right? It put it on everybody's computer, phone, etc. And we got into this habit, which I don't think was, I think it was good, but I don't think it was the best way of doing it, just assigning playlists. What's being watched in those? Because I don't think players need it 15 times shown over and over again. They need it pointed out and illustrated maybe one time for that to be most effective as you're pointing out one particular technique or footwork, whatever it might be. Looking at it that way, I think, can help you be more effective.
To add to that, what I would say is, that one clip, that one teach tape moment, like you're always going to refresh it. Early on in my career, I did a project, it was all the old Brandon Weeden stuff with, the drop back pass game versus all these different coverages, and spent so much time on it. And like, man, what great reps. We'll never need, anything else updated. We'll have it all by concept and by coverage, and we'll be ready to go. And, the kids want to see themselves, right? You're going to have new clips. You're going to have new situations. You're going to have new variations. Like that great teach tape of a situation. Like everyone talks about the Packers kick return where he puts his feet out of bounds and touches the ball.
Right.
Where there's going to be another one that happens week 3, and it's more, aware for your kids because, man, there's a team that beat somebody that probably shouldn't have, and here's a reason they got to the 35-yard line to start that final drive. So there's going to be something more impactful, and just trying to keep our eyes and ears open to that. That's something I've learned. You're never going to have the perfect clip. There's always going to be a new touch-up.
I think that's so important in looking at it that way, that our guys watch games, they see games, and now when you can relate it to something like that happened immediately, it brings that into their head. And you and I are we'll talk about this a little bit more, but we're going to do a series during the season where we take coaches through some of these different scenarios and things that happen at times of the year and how you teach those things. But, you look at just in the area special teams, how many things come up maybe once a year or once every other year, but you want your guys to know it. You might only have the chance to walk through it, but if you have this library and you're sending out as a coach, these moments here and there, to start getting into their head to know that, all right, this is a rule that we could take advantage of, or this is something that may happen that we need to be prepared for. Teach tapes serve that purpose as well. There's so many things. The game's so dynamic, so many things that can happen. The introduction to those things really is the first step. Yes, and you and I will talk in detail about how those things are practiced later, but at least you put it into their mind and they know this could happen, this is what I do.
And those small bites, that's all we can handle, right? Everyone, we got our plates full with life, with family, the kids with school. There's so many things of like, if we try to do the old school bomb every situation in one meeting, all of our brains feel like they're coming out of our ears and no one really feels prepared, but we check the box. So the more we can kind of dose it in small bites, I say that as a reminder to myself too. I mean, I still fell into that trap of you just want to get it all in. Like, I got it all in, so now I feel okay. Well, it's not about how much I know. It's about how much they know. Somebody told me with the situation stuff, nothing matters till it matters. So, we can say it's all good right now because it's not happening, but hopefully if you do it the right way early on, it can, save you some, wear and tear later on.
Yes, for sure. And we always talk about teachable moments. Teachable moments to me are going to be those things that happen during the season. You might find it on opponent breakdown and something that happened in your league and in the teams that you face. You might find it in the NFL. You might find it in college football on Saturday. But the tools are right there for us to really quickly go in and either screenshot something or screen record something and bring it to your players, or send it out through a group text. To me, that's taking these segments we can put together in teach tapes or pull from teach tapes and creating a teachable moment with it.
And what I hope to, really make sure I say at some point here, Keith, is I hope to be a resource for whoever wants to, drop me a DM, or is there a topic, or how can we give back? Because where I am right now in my life, I don't have a game to prepare for on a Saturday. I don't have an unofficial visit with a recruit, or, those things that take up your 80%. I mean, another meeting with a kid, he drops by your office, you got position meets, like these aspirational things that we're talking about right now in a perfect world scenario. That's where I can dive into those 15 percenters that we wish we could spend more time on, but that's not realistic all the time. So everyone's got the things they've got to do in the day-to-day. Hopefully this aspect that we're going to keep diving into lets people get that insight and still do the things they have to get done day-to-day.
And for our listeners, I want you to know this is a passion for Coach. He does a great job with it. I mean, just incredible, the diversity and what's being shared here, and from every level, just great things that I know you can take something from and pass on to your players, even if it's, you see something there, and just sharing that tweet with your players, I think will be huge in helping you teach them and improve their football IQ and accomplish what you want to accomplish in your different positions and units. So, Coach, give us just a brief overview. As I said, it's a passion for you, but what are you using to put this together? How are you curating all this great content?
One of the things I'm trying to really focus on is not take from what somebody's already put together in a presentation, right? If it's somebody's Glacier, if it's a Nike clinic, like, let that live on its own. This is all open source things that I'm trying to keep it at the NFL level for these drill examples, just so, everyone's got a different way of doing it. But if these 32 teams are, the pinnacle of the profession, like, that's what they're doing. Right, wrong, or indifferent. It's open source material that are floating around the internet, and, just having my own ways to aggregate it and make it easy on me to check in on what's been published and put out there. hopefully I can trim it up and make it something with a message. But yeah, it's nothing that is behind a paywall. I mean, all this information's out there. It's just hopefully curating it and making sure people can see what they need as they need it.
Yeah, and I would suggest you take him up on interacting with him, and if there's something you're looking for, something you need, I'm sure Coach has a resource or a clip, a Teach Tape segment that he could put up on @TeachTapes. And that leads me to what I mentioned before, that you and I are going to continue this through and work with coaches throughout the season to provide you, short episodes every single week of things that are going to matter and help your team through the season with Teach Tapes. And I know both you and I are excited about that.
Can't wait. And thank you for approaching me about the idea, Keith. I think it'll be a really good way to cross over and, just like we said, stay current, see what's going on. And yeah, the football passion has never left. Like, that was never the issue. It's just the way that now you keep things in the right percentages. And this is a way that I can dive in and hopefully still be a part of the community.
So we'll be kicking this one off technically on what's week 1 for most of the country in high school football, the week of August 22nd. And we'll be carrying you through the season all the way through to the end and looking at different aspects of things you need to think about early on in the season. As you hit the mid-season, some things maybe that will come up. As you get into the late season and, the differential between the teams playing in talent is closing and closing and closing. As you get to the championship, we're going to cover all those things too. I do believe it'll be a very interesting series. It's as simple as some of the things that Noel Mazzoni or DJ Elliott and I did last year. We'll be looking at some of the games and the things that are happening out there, the things we see over the course of the week, and bringing it to you to hopefully give you some ideas for adjustments, practice ideas, etc., that are going to help your team. And it's going to be a fun series. So I appreciate you taking the time, Coach, to be able to do that with us.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me, and look forward to keep this thing rolling.